From the heart of trucker America, my boy Reed Coverdale, host of The Naturalist, Capitalist.
As the left becomes less religious, they become more statist. And as the right becomes more religious, they still become more statist.
Whenever you add government, you by default remove community.
But it actually starts with Bush, right? Like in 2006.
That'd be the most satisfying, like, chair shot, ka-chunk.
And I have no intention of keeping any promise that I make.
The radical messaging is almost more pragmatic sometimes.
It's bad that the state is as big as it is.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're having a great Labor Day weekend. I'm coming to you from an extremely makeshift studio on Cape Cod. I've been talking a lot about Afghanistan. Everyone has. So I figured, hey, if I'm going to talk about Afghanistan, why not have a couple people who actually were in Afghanistan on the show? So back on the show for, I think, the third or fourth time, we got Justin O'Donnell. He served in the army in Afghanistan, and he's also been longtime member of the Libertarian Party, ran for U.S. Senate in New Hampshire last year. How you doing, Justin?
What the fuck are you doing on Cape Cod?
I'm just out here for the long weekend, so just hanging out with the family because the family lives in New Hampshire, so just all hanging out here.
Sounds terrible. I hate Cape Cod's like on my list of places to never go back.
Oh, okay. Well, it's good we didn't do this one in person then, I guess. And then I think the third time I've had this guy on the show, also Army veteran from Afghanistan, and also ran for Congress in Idaho's 4th district last year as a Libertarian. Joe Evans, how you doing, Joe?
Doing good, and it was the 1st district. We actually only got 2 congressional districts here in the state of Idaho. But yeah, last year was my first run for that seat, running again this cycle. Yeah, and Afghanistan, man, Jesus, what a hellhole!
Almost as bad as Cape Cod.
Are you sure? Yeah, I think it's actually a lot better than Cape Cod.
Have you ever been on Cape Cod in the winter?
Yes.
No, I haven't.
It's nothing but heroin and unemployment.
Oh, nice. So Afghanistan,
exactly, with more inclement weather
and pure heroin.
There's no camel spiders on Cape Cod, though.
Yeah, well, there's worse things than camel spiders on Cape Cod.
Yeah, there's Kennedys.
Kennedys. Crony capitalists and politicians. But yes.
And not the good kind of Kennedys, the dead ones, the like drunk with power ones.
Ooh. That's one of the things I found out about Massachusetts. I got a friend who does a lot of genealogy stuff. And Cape Cod, I mean, the family trees there are friggin' telephone poles. There's more intermarriage among the rich people there in, Massachusetts than there is down south in Alabama. All these rumors we hear about Alabama, and turns out Massachusetts is worse. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about.
Wait, I should have titled this episode Cape Cod instead of Afghanistan, but anyway.
No, we'll get to it here in a moment.
Yeah, so
this is one of those things, a lot of people need something to relate to. And there's things about Cape Cod that we can relate to Afghanistan, the corruption, what's going on, especially considering from day one, we used, one of our own cronyists, Karzai, to inject into the seat, in order to legitimize the Afghan government in the eyes of the UN and the U.S. people. And, from there, it just deteriorated. Complete shit show. But, Justin, when were you there?
Ghazni, 2009.
2000, Ghazni. Oh, man. Yeah.
Beautiful place. Basically North Pakistan.
It is, it's amazing. And that's one of the things, Afghanistan is close to about the size of Texas as far as area goes. And you got the full range of terrain that goes there with it. Have you've been from one end of Texas to the other, right, Reed?
I have, yeah.
You've driven through it. You got the deserts, and then you got the mountains, and then you go down into the coastal, where you get the Gulf Coast weather, and Afghanistan's the same, other than the fact it's entirely landlocked. But you got mountains, you got the open ranges, you got down south where you got a combination of deserts and straight up agricultural land. It starts looking beautiful as you start going through the different places. If you get an opportunity to get out and do the drive around the ring road and see some of the other places other than, like you said, Ghazni. I like Ghazni there. They got, if I remember right, the base there had an awful lot of, what was it? Olive orchards over there in Ghazni, just off of the base, didn't you?
They were not quite yet. They were not really growing anything at the time. They were just being used for cover.
Right.
Nothing was really growing that year. That was a rough year in Ghazni, and I remember because right in 2010, the 101st took over Ghazni, and they actually lost the FOB to the Taliban at one point. It was the heart of the Taliban. It's fucking central. Yeah. It's the Pashto capital.
Yeah, it is.
So, but no, it's fucking retarded over there. It's just poverty and corruption, just like Cape Cod. But it is beautiful. You're right. I mean, that's one of the things I love. Fucking, I was harping on Malang on Twitter. Malang Costa. If you don't follow Malang Costa on Twitter, you're missing out. Just some fucking 20-something-year-old kid with a smartphone in Afghanistan has been tweeting about beating him back in Empire. And he had a tweet yesterday where he's like, I can't wait for tourism to open back up. I cannot wait to welcome people to come do tourism in the beautiful country of Afghanistan.
Oh, it is. It's gorgeous. You can go skiing there. The tourism, if they ever get the agriculture up that's not opium based, the orchards, fruit orchards. Back in '76, Afghanistan was like the center for almond production, global almond production, before they turned Kandahar province into the center for global opium production.
Well, I mean, the United States did that first.
Well, yeah, we did. We set them up for that. And that's one of the great things about the history of Afghanistan, because, by the time I made my third trip down there, we got in and we were taking a look at what was going on. And I was down in Kandahar and I was looking at what was going on with the agricultural production, especially since down in Kandahar province and Helmand province, it was opium. And the only reason they were able to do that was because an Idaho company back in 1976 went and built a dam, went and built the biggest reservoir in Afghanistan. And that was what was handling the irrigation for the entire zone. Idaho style, what was it? The Green Revolution, agriculture powered Afghanistan's opium production for 20 friggin' years, man. It's spectacular. How deep we dug ourselves into that hole.
Well, I mean, it only worked with U.S. military security because the Taliban opposed the growing of opium. Yeah,
they did. And for legitimate reason. And it's one of the reasons why we had so much trouble with the warlords when we came back in. And you go back and you take a look at the way, one of the reasons why the Taliban even came into existence was because the warlords had taken up a practice to pederasty, all over Afghanistan. And the Taliban went, no, that's not hadith. That's not clean. That's, it's not going to happen in our country. And they literally kicked all of the pederasts out of the country. So when the U.S. comes in and says, no, the Taliban's gone, you know who we invited in to take control back? Boy fuckers.
Or LA Times journalists. Fucking, what's his name? His name slipped me. The president that just fled the fucking country.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but it was going around last week. It was fucking hilarious. The day the Soviets pulled out of Afghanistan, he published an article as a reporter for the LA Times about the collapse of the Soviet puppet government and the opportunity for the United States to step in and shape the future of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Full circle ending for you right there.
Right, and then he ended up fleeing to the Russian embassy.
Yeah, with millions of dollars of cash, right, and a few
and a Cadillac.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of those things. So, Ghazni, you covered an awful lot of stuff that was going up in Ghazni area. You know, what was your MOS while you were up there? What was your job?
11 Bravo.
11 Bravo. 11 Bang Bang.
Infantry. Proud graduate of the Benning School for Boys.
That's a degenerate son of a bitches there, man.
I was a tow missile operator and a heavy weapons expert.
So you were
X-rays.
You were what, 19 or 20?
Hotels.
You were
19 at the time.
Yeah.
So no, we didn't have any hotels.
No, so you were running special weapons squad minus the hotels, and you got stuck with the tows and stuff, huh?
I love the tow, man.
Oh, it's a great weapon.
Just being able to look 10 miles out and say, "Oh, there's a fucker."
Wire guided all the way. Boom.
Tell you what, there's nothing quite exhilarating if you ever want an adrenaline rush as shooting an expired tow missile because Raytheon put dates on them so they could sell more, and we were of the opinion, fuck it, it's not that expired, and then having the wire snap 600 feet out of the tube and it circle back on you.
Whoa.
Oops. Oops. Jeez. It's all right. It's all good. It's all good.
Jose's making comments on our official.
We got Spud Ruckus. Hi, Spud. How you doing out there? Ryan Bedford. Awesome. Thanks, Jose. We got plenty of facial hair going on here today.
Mine has since the last stream we did together. We were all bearded, but I've broken the trend.
Real men don't grow facial hair. Real men get so busy that one day when they wake up and look in the mirror, they realize they forgot to shave for the past decade.
About where it's at, man. You know, shave. What's a razor, man? You know how long it's been? Break out the clippers? Probably break the clippers at this point. So 2008, you had Ghazni up there. I was there in 2002 and 2004 at Bagram Air Base. You know, both times I was there, I was with the task force headquarters for the entire country.
So you were a PowerPoint jockey.
Yeah, I was PowerPoint jockey. You got no idea how much freaking PowerPoint I had to do, especially considering just how little information we actually had to work with. And I was doing signal intelligence analyst in 2002, 2004 up in Bagram for the CJTF, and I was down in Kandahar doing signals intelligence collection and analysis in 2011, 2010. You know, and it's interesting because as an intelligence analyst, they want you to understand the culture. You need to understand the culture. And you got somebody who's sitting right next to you who's a linguist, probably naturalized American citizen. And he's going through and he's listening to the tapes and he's transcribing them and he's telling you what these people are saying. And you're going, dude, I didn't need to know that. There's no intelligence value to that.
All right.
You know?
Well, at what point in your tour there, at what point did you realize that the war wasn't going to be won?
Around 2004. You know, the reason why is because we're sitting down in headquarters and we're going around and we're trying to figure out, and we need coverage because we got troops in contact. You know, but the troops in contact happens during this space when we don't have aerial coverage. We're going, why don't we have 24/7 in Afghanistan, knowing that we could have troops in contact at any time? It's like, yeah, well, we don't have the resources because if we give up any of the space for Southern Watch in Iraq, you know, how are we going to plan for the Iraq invasion? It was about that time that I realized, you know, they don't actually want to win Afghanistan. They want to use this as a proving ground for commanders and stuff before they send them into Iraq. And this is a real world training ground where we can shoot people, where we can kill people. That's what we're here to do. Teach them how to shoot and kill people. So when we send them to a real theater, you know, they can actually do what it is they're paid to do.
Was it a red flag when the hunt for Osama bin Laden died pretty quickly after going into Afghanistan? Was that like, wait a second, what? Why is this mission suddenly shifting?
2002 and 2002 was weird. Operation Anaconda. I got there just after Operation Anaconda. We had a pretty minimal list, and that was where the SEALs got into trouble trying to hit a target. And this is one of those bizarre things about Afghanistan. The altitude is so high that, only the Chinooks can fly anywhere. The lift on the helicopters isn't enough. Only the Chinooks have enough lift to actually get the altitude that they want. And we had Chinook that was going in to set down on an enemy post. And we knew there were some mujahideen there. And it wasn't your Afghan Taliban either. These were mercs out of Tajikistan, that were there. They were coming in to fight with the Americans, but they got, they had a pretty good system of they'd take a couple pot shots and then retreat and get out of the area. We didn't give them
It's like we taught them well.
Right? Yeah, but we didn't give them an option to retreat this time because some lazy ass SEAL commander decided he wanted the helicopter to sit down right on top of the enemy OP. And they fired back. And they hit the helicopter. The helicopter did a little rock and somebody fell out. And then it turned into a major mess because we ended up with dead people, and Mujahideen had to do a weird evacuation plan that they hadn't rehearsed. And yeah, it got ugly.
I think the point I realized it was lost was we caught a kid digging a ditch on the side of the road. He didn't have any explosives on him. He didn't have any weapons on him, just a shovel and digging a hole.
Yep.
We knew what the deal was, but we didn't have anything that we could hold him on or turn him over to MPs with. So we turned him over to the Ghazni police and said A&A and A&P can figure out what to do with him.
Right.
And the police chief says, what do you want us to do with him? I'm like, I don't know. Here's what happened. Do what you do with him. He's like, just cut off his hands and send him home. And the lieutenant's like, you can't cut off his hands. He's like, why not? The Russians would do it. We're not the Russians. You're not winning. I'm like, why the fuck are we here?
Right?
Like, at that point, when the locals realize that, like, when the locals are telling you that you've already lost the war.
Yeah. Yeah. Your local allies, no less. Your local allies, no less, are telling you, you've lost, dude. What are you still doing here? You're not ruthless enough. We went through 20 years of this, my brother lost his hands, doing this. I don't understand why I shouldn't take this kid's hands. But yeah, no, it's complete shit.
So that was 12 years ago, 2009, right, Justin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And nothing's changed. Like, nothing has changed at all. Like, Ghazni was one of the first cities to fall when the Taliban started taking over this year. Because it's the capital of Pashto, Afghanistan. It's the heart of the Pashto tribes, and that's where they route everything from. The police chief down there was one of them. At any given time, the police chief and half the police force was on the Taliban payroll the whole goddamn time. They didn't join the army because they wanted to fight for the freedom of their country. They didn't join the police force because they cared about upholding the law. They joined the police force and they joined the army because American checks cleared every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, it put them in a position of authority to do whatever the fuck they wanted inside Pashto, because there was no repercussions, because the police weren't policing the police and the army. We weren't policing the police and the army. They were ostensibly our allies, and there was nobody to stop them from doing what they wanted to do. At any given time, I think you could attribute at least 80% of the crime in the Ghazni area to the police.
Yeah,
whether it's robbery, kidnap, rape, whatever, and half the time they wouldn't even take their fucking uniforms off. They'd be on duty while doing it.
Wow.
And you wonder why the locals got pissed at us.
Yeah. So
how
many of these guys got killed when the Taliban took over? Because from my understanding, it sounds like most of them just kind of immediately surrendered. Right? There wasn't much fighting at all.
And that's one of those things where it's weird because depending on who the leader was, which tribes he was associated with, they may have allowed him to surrender, they may have allowed him to just move on, or they may have just quietly disappeared him, or he found a way to actually get out of country 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, from what I saw, Ghazni was a peaceful surrender. Like the Ghazni police and the ANA in Ghazni just turned around and said, "Hey, congratulations, we're the Taliban." But at the same time, they posted a video on Twitter of the execution of the police chief. Apparently, the new police chief in Ghazni opposed it, and the police arrested him and executed him before turning everything over to the Taliban. Other cities in the north put up like a token resistance, but like when 70% of your force turned around and started fighting from behind you, there wasn't shit to do. Kandahar was a great one. There was a Vice documentary they put together. They got a reporter out of Kandahar. He was on like one of the last flights out, and they got him to sit down and talk about what happened. He's like, he managed to get him attached to the O3 force, which is Afghan Special Forces. Those were the guys you could kind of trust. They weren't trained in Afghanistan. They were like recruited through the ANA, brought up like, all right, like these are the vetted ones, and sent to the United States to train. And they trained with the U.S. Special Forces in the U.S. before going back to Afghanistan. And those guys are vicious. They'd fit in any Ranger unit, or they'd keep up with the SEALs any day of the week. And there was a battalion of them that were tasked to hold Kandahar. And this reporter got attached to them. And they were getting ready for the fight. They were outnumbered 5-1 and thought they could hold Kandahar against 5-1 odds because they were that much better trained and that much better equipped. And then they got a freaking order from Kabul to stand down and surrender.
Wow.
Kabul had negotiated with the Taliban that if they let the O3s evacuate, they would just lay down their weapons and give them Kandahar.
Which is fun because most of the people who are in the Taliban, were looking at the O3s and say, we'll marry you into the tribe, man. Come on. Yeah. But that's one of the things, 20 years with the ANA, we go in and we recruit Afghans. And, I've actually made the comment before, we taught them how to fight Americans before we taught them how to be Romans. At no time did we go in and did we do an education process. At no time did we go in and do a deculturalization or a reculturalization. We just said, come on over here. We'll pay you to carry a gun around for us. And most, like Justin said, the checks cleared every 2 weeks. They were able to provide for their families, but at the end of the day, they were still members of their original tribe. We got the same problem here in the U.S. You go do inner city recruiting anywhere. You pick people up, in downtown L.A. Half of them are Bloods, half of them are Crips. You spend 7 weeks teaching them riflemanship. They spend 4 years doing their tour as an 11 Bravo or whatever they ended up doing. And then they're back out and they're right back in the streets in L.A. wearing the same colors they were 4 years before.
Now with better training.
And that's what we did in Afghanistan. We bring them in 2 years, 4 years, train them up, send them back to their tribes. Michael's giving you shit about your haircut, Reed.
At least it's not wet.
Yeah. I took a shower 3 hours ago, not 5 minutes ago, because I didn't have to work today. So, what was, what were you guys thinking as we left and the Taliban just took over in a few days? What were you just like, yep, that's kind of what I figured, or was it just rage or embarrassment, or what?
That was a weird fucking day. Like, honestly,
well, the entire week was weird.
Yeah, when they announced a withdrawal, I had it at a month. I'm like, it's a month. It'll take them a fucking month, just because the roads and like moving the people from Ghazni and from the Pashto regions to move up and eventually take Kabul, I figured would take a month. I didn't expect 4 days. But like watching the video of like that morning, I remember I got up, turned on the news, and like doing some work, and they showed the freaking helicopter landing on the embassy, and I immediately screenshotted it. I immediately went and found a picture from Saigon.
Yes.
I immediately put it up on Twitter. I'm like, the empire's fallen. And like,
or what was it? 2 days before Biden was there going, we are not going to have a Saigon moment. We are not going to have helicopters lifting people off of the embassy.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
And then like, it actually got like real emotional at one point. I'm just like, fucking. At one point, I'm like, oh, this is how Vietnam vets felt. Like I understand it. Like the whole fucking thing was a waste. Like I know a lot of people who didn't come back from Afghanistan, and realizing, like, knowing it as an anti-war activist and as a libertarian, that I've been preaching that it's been a bunch of waste. I've been telling people it's been a wasted 20 years, that we haven't accomplished anything. At that moment, it was really like, oh shit, it really was a waste. We didn't accomplish anything. And it hit like a fucking rock. It was something hard to accept for a minute. But then, like, a couple hours later, I put out a tweet. I'm just like, you know what? All of that, but it's over. The important part is it's fucking over. And
well,
that's
as much as I wish to agree with you on that, we still got troops sitting in Kabul. We still got a CIA black site that we're evacuating people out of. We aren't as gone from there as we need to be. But
the last conventional troops left. The other day. CIA is going to be there. Whatever. CIA is everywhere. CIA is probably in Manchester. It's probably fucking FBI that watches my house every couple of days. Who the fuck knows? At least on a list somewhere.
Yeah, definitely, no doubt about that.
Which of us aren't on a list at this point?
That's a whole different fight to have. Getting the CIA out to stop existing. Honestly, I'm not sure getting the CIA to like shut down would be a good idea. Right now, the CIA has like ostensibly at least a little bit of oversight. If like the United States government was to tell the CIA to shut down, I think it would just be a matter of days till the CIA realized they don't need the government funding, because they're really good at black markets, and they could just they'd be a whole lot freer to operate without oversight.
They'd become a private company, bro.
Ryan's got a question here. Ryan, what percentage would you say the opium trade played in our being there? Oh, played absolutely everything in us being there for 20 years. Okay. Now, I've gotten some flack because I've gone in with an estimate of 80 to 90% of the opium trade came out of Afghanistan over the last 20 years. Okay. Now, this is the illicit opium trade that we're talking about. 300,000 hectares of agricultural land devoted to opium. And it was moving. Now, during my time in Kandahar, this was down in 2010, 2011, we were working with the 3rd Kandak Border Patrol. Okay, these were the border police. And General Razik at the time, God, what a charismatic asshole.
I just looked it up for you, by the way. 82% of the global opium supply in 2020 came out of Afghanistan.
Right? Okay, now General Razik, he was in charge of the 3rd Kandak. 3rd Kandak was responsible for the southern borders. Helmand province and Kandahar province were responsible for nearly 80% of the opium production, of the 80% of the opium production. So we were looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of about 65% of the opium production was going through General Razik's border patrols. And this man had so much influence because of all of the drugs that he was moving through the border into Pakistan, which would then go into China, which would then become fentanyl, that would then be shipped to the U.S. and all the other second world nations that love, shooting up heroin and, doing the fentanyl product. So General Razik was responsible for handling 65% of the opium production. And at the time, we were actually helping him by running counterinsurgency operations against his competition, right? We'd tell him where his counter smugglers were smuggling their opium from, and he'd send his troops in. He'd kill the counter smugglers, steal their drugs, sell them himself, and then use the profits from selling those drugs to pay off the blood price for the people he had just killed.
Yeah, this is the war. No one knows that we took any natural resources from the country. Like you talk to the average person and they're like, I don't get why we were there. We didn't steal their lithium or their oil. And it's like, we took a lot of their opium. 300,000 acres of opium, 65%.
CIA soft site right there in Kandahar Airfield with us, where we were working down along the Pakistan border, Taliban. We were working with pederast warlords, on our side of the border. We were chasing down the Taliban, who were anti-heroin, anti-opium, anti-pederasty. We were chasing them down over on the other side of the border. Yeah. And we're looking at, oh God, the entire mess. The people who should have been in charge from a moral perspective were the ones we were hunting down. Meanwhile, we were supporting the ones that supported our greed, supported, our exploitation, that supported, our goals in the destruction of, what was essentially Afghan culture, and decimating the entire region, destabilizing the entire region.
Honestly, I think that might be the worst fucking part about looking back at it. Like, it's 20 years of peace activists going, like, being anti-war because they claimed it was a war for resources and a war for oil. We didn't get the oil or the fucking resources. At least if we got the fucking oil and resources, it might have offset some of the economic damage that we fucking created by going to war for 20 years.
Right? Yeah.
No, China gets all the fucking benefit now. China's going to start opening lithium mines in fucking northern Afghanistan. They're going to build a pipeline straight through to the Mediterranean, and the Taliban's providing security for their construction.
Right?
It's so funny seeing the reaction to that. So many conservatives are like, oh, you see, this is proof we need to stay there and we need to fight them harder. And it's like, no, this is kind of proving we were doing this the wrong way, trying to occupy the country. And
one of the other things is you take a look at the way the crony capitalists have been running just about frigging everything. Okay, we've dominated the lithium trade. So as long as we can keep lithium production from happening in Afghanistan, we can charge premium costs every place else we own mines.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, this is control of the flow. This is profit margin guarantees because we've restricted the availability of it. Okay. We got mines we can mine here for lithium in the US, that's actually larger than the mines that we got down in South America or the mines that are in China. We take a look at the natural resources that are in Afghanistan and the mountains there. We didn't do anything. Why didn't we do anything? Because we already had a lockdown on the global production of certain things, and we didn't want greater production. This created a higher profit margin on the stuff that we did control. It's the way we did it with oil. It's the way we did it in Iraq. It's the way we did it with lithium in Afghanistan and several other resources that were there as well. It was control. We prevent the flow in order to generate greater profit margins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Except opium. I mean, we keep opium flowing.
Right.
So that was to create higher profit margins.
Yeah. True crony capitalism at work, man. True crony capitalism at work.
You were on the border of Pakistan. Did we only send drones into Pakistan? Were there ever any boots on the ground?
Always.
Pakistan.
Constantly.
Always.
Oh yeah.
Here's the thing: the Federated
unofficially in Pakistan, or
no? It's God. There's no border.
Yeah,
there's
no border. It's a lot of like one of the most common missions infantry engages in modern combat is called movement to contact. It's like, we think there might be somebody out there, so we're just going to drive in that fucking direction until they shoot at us and eliminate the stronghold there. And there's a lot of you fucking drive, you get in contact, and then you pursue on their retreat, and then you look at your GPS and your maps like, oh fuck, we're in Pakistan.
Then you turn around, drive back across the border.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was one of the things, regardless of what was going on, we'd talk about it. The usual thing is if we needed to do a helicopter insertion and an aerial insertion for a snatch and grab, we'd say, well, we know he's in Quetta, or we know he's in, one of these other places just across the border, but that's there. And yeah. So we can't actually fly a helicopter in there unless we get a bunch of the special operations Blackbirds, to go in and hit it so that there's no identification in case something goes wrong. But yeah, for the most part, if there were troops on the ground, they're crossing borders all the time. The skirmish was going back and forth. There is no border in those mountains. Especially considering the borders were drawn by people in Britain, 300 years ago that had never seen, or 100 years ago now, who had never actually seen the terrain. They would pick a river and go, oh, that's the border, or they'd pick a mountain ridge and go, oh, that's the border. But they'd never put their own feet on the ground to understand the watersheds, understand the terrain, understand the mountains, and literally pick a single valley that you want to wander, and you can wander back and forth between Afghanistan and Pakistan 20 times from one end of it to the other.
Yeah. What is it you said the other day, Justin? Borders are imaginary lines that people who stopped fighting each other 200 years ago drew, or something like that.
Yeah, a border is nothing but an imaginary line drawn on a map where two groups of people got tired of killing each other 200 years ago, and nationalism and immigration arguments are based around the fact that some people believe that an individual's worth and value is based on which side of that line they were born on.
Yeah. We got a question here from let's see. Oh, wrong one. Where is it? Question. Besides CIA working in Afghanistan, did you work at all with MI6, ISI, Mossad? If so, what capacity? Share info, insert intel operatives?
Probably. If they're doing their job, you wouldn't know. That's the difference. Is like for every CIA agent that was identified as a CIA analyst and you knew that they were CIA, there's probably 4 or 5 fucking contractors that were there who were on the CIA payroll and never told anyone.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that was fairly prolific all over Afghanistan.
Yeah.
We went through a brief period where we said, okay, we will only put so many troops in the U.S. troops in country. And what they did was they fudged the numbers and said, okay, we can only put trigger pullers in country. So they went in and pulled out all of the support troops, and they replaced the support troops with support contractors.
Yeah.
And every one of those contractors had a number of different jobs. They go to Boeing and say, okay, we need 150 analysts of this particular skill set. And now you'd have, rather than analysts wearing uniforms, they were now in civilian clothes. And they may or may not have been NSA. They may or may not have been CIA. They may or may not have been Edward Snowden or Chelsea. Who knows who they were or the reason why they got contracted to come in. But the point was they weren't wearing a uniform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they literally could have been anywhere doing anything. Now, in 2001, 2002, when we first went in and we were still looking at Tora Bora and seeing whether or not the Taliban were there, and you got those nice little funny front end gun cameras of the missiles boring in, flying into the tunnels, and the excerpts from the phone calls going, oh man, we just got blown up, and there's the follow-up missile that comes right back in after him because the first missile missed and he lit up his phone and said he was still alive. That time frame, we were still dealing with an awful lot of special operations forces. You had U.S. Army special operations forces out doing the cavalry thing, out riding horseback with the Northern Alliance, developing relationships up north. You had the Australian special forces based out of Bagram that go in and fly.
By the way, the Soviet sympathizing communist Northern Alliance.
Dude, they were Pashtun. They hosted you. As long as you were good with them, they didn't care.
Until the next day when they tried to kill you.
Well, that was because you didn't leave when you said you were going to leave. That's your fault, man. But that's one of those things.
That was who General Dostum was with, right?
Dostum, yes. Yeah. He was the Northern Alliance. He was the one that was killed by Al Qaeda because he was one of the few personalities who was actually capable of uniting Afghanistan under a single person. But I mean, when we went in 2002 and 2004, the country was essentially divided into 4 quadrants.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the north west, that was Herat, beautiful country, but it's desert. And most of the people were related to Iranians right across the border. So there was the border between Afghanistan and Iran was literally a sieve. Relationships between the tribes on both sides, people walking back and forth across it all the time. The Khan of Herat actually had, I think, about a 15 MiG Air Force or something like that when we arrived in country. He took his 15 MiGs, flew them right across the border into Iran. Then you had the south. Yeah. You had the southwest. You had the southeast, which was Kandahar and Helmand province, which was the bulk of the agricultural production. Yeah, the opium trade, the bulk of that. And then you had the northeast, which was where Kabul was, and Bagram Airfield.
Yeah.
Great times, man. Remember 2002, one of the times we actually went out into, we'd set up inside a hangar bay, old Russian hangar bay, where they'd used to do repairs on the Russian aircraft, which was fun. You take a tour around the perimeter and you see all the old Russian MiGs and helicopters that had been destroyed and set off on the side with all of the Afghani graffiti all over it. But one time we were inside the hangar and somebody looked up and went, "There's a live mortar in the roof." Yeah, just the stupid stuff that you have. It's like, how did the people come in not see that? Were they not paying attention when they did the security evaluation of the hangar?
Oh, my favorite is like anytime you'd find find UXO, and like anytime you find like an IED on the road and get it dismantled, there would always be one intel analyst that fucking, oh, the Russians are supplying the terrorists. I'm like, no, they're not. It's just fucking left over. Like there's UXO all over the fucking country. Like
right?
You go dig a hole in the field. Like if you didn't find a bomb in the first hole you drilled, you'll find one in the second. Like,
one of my experiences early on, this was the second time. We started expanding the area around Bagram Airfield. And of course, there's UXO all over the place because the Russians would go in, they'd drop it before they landed their plane, and you ended up with all sorts of stuff there at different points. And one of the warlords had actually started putting a bounty on mines and explosives. So the kids would go out and harvest the explosives from and the UXO from the different fields and bring them back to the warlord for the bounty. I remember sitting there one day, and all of a sudden there's this huge boom. It's about 100 yards just outside of the fence. And, later on we find out two of the local boys had taken a hammer and chisel to a cluster bomb.
Holy shit.
Took out not only themselves, but at least 2 other cousins and one of their mothers. It's like, well, that's what happens when you take a hammer and chisel to 30-year-old cluster bombs.
Man, you can't say much about the education.
Yeah, but the kids have been doing it. They've been relatively successful up until that point. But yeah, they go around and harvest the mines in the UXO and turn around and sell them to the warlord. Occasionally you get the warlord sending us a little reminder, a little rocket launch at one end of the airfield to say, "You guys need us. Without us, this would happen much more often." So we keep the regular paychecks just so they keep shooting it in unoccupied space of the base. Yeah.
Well, that brings up the answer to Marvin's question. Marvin's next question: the win hearts and minds activities. None of that was ever successful. The only thing we ever tried was to give them money.
Dude, how do you win the hearts and minds of people when you're turning around and supporting guys who run into the local village to kidnap boys so they can rape them?
Yeah, it's the
You can't.
the closest thing to winning hearts and minds you'll ever see over there would be like an Air Force civil affairs lieutenant with a briefcase of money, just handing out stacks of fucking $100 bills to people, saying Americans are your friends, and they'll be like, "Yep, sure, thanks, bye."
Okay, now occasionally there would be some good ones. I remember early on, we'd have some liaison work, and we'd open up the local base infirmary or the hospital, and we'd allow the locals to come in and get treated by our doctors there on post. And occasionally I'd walk by the gate and I'd see the line of the locals, getting ready to come in and see the doctors on, visiting day. And you'd see people lined up. You'd see a grandfather, who'd be walking in with his granddaughter of all things. And you realize that she's limping because of something going on. So you would occasionally see goodwill along those lines develop, but at the end of the day, we'd turn around and trash it.
That's how the population doubled. Listen, the population of Afghanistan has doubled in 20 years, from 20 to 40 million, and a large part of that has been access to Western medical supplies, Western medical techniques and training that's kept people alive longer. The child mortality rate is through the fucking floor compared to where it was 20 years ago. But 65% of the population is under the age of 25, and the Taliban is 3 times the size now than it was in 2001.
Well, the thing is, the one thing that increased, child survivability rate the most was when we actually got the physicians in there to talk about women's health to the women and at least some of the men. Because the problem was, homosexuality is rampant there. No matter what they say, there is homosexuality there. The men love to love the men.
No matter how many people Malang throws off the roof, he's not going to root it out.
No, he's not. But the problem is all of these men who love the men turn around and go home to their wives after making love to the men. And they don't wipe the shit off their dicks. Which was why the women always had these reproductive issues that were causing issues during maternity as well as child fetal development and the whole process. Just getting in and telling the men to wipe their dicks before they screw their wives improved mothers' health, improved the survivability of the mothers. Stupid stuff, man. Stupid.
I think we found our promo clip for the episode right there. Oh man.
No, but look throughout history. Wherever has there been a war, a generational war, where that ended up with the population doubling over the course of the war? It's usually after a war ends, you see a mass surge in births and a huge increase in population. Yeah. But this is over the course of the war that the population of this country doubled. If we couldn't win the hearts and minds of people who grew up under U.S. occupation, what makes you think we could convince the people who were upset that we invaded in the first place?
So what were your civilian interactions like, aside from when you found them digging a ditch to put an IED in?
There's fucking wanted shit. That's all they have. You roll out, there's kids begging for fucking candy. You roll into a village or a town, there's fucking men begging for money. That's all this fucking is, because they know you're going to give it to them. They know that the civil affairs lieutenant, she's got a briefcase and she's going to start handing out fucking cash, because all they're going to do is cry, there's a hole in my house from your bombs. Okay, here's $1,000. You don't want to fucking know if there's a hole in his house from the bombs. Right. You don't even know if the guy has a fucking house. 2 of my goats were killed by a raid. Here's $1,000. Here's $1,000. Here's $1,000.
Yeah.
Just fucking hand out millions of dollars a week with no accountability and no action. Fucking a solid chunk of every dime that they got from civil affairs and from CIA and from any kind of hearts and minds operation went directly to the warlords and taxes, who paid it in tribute to the Taliban, which was used to purchase weapons to fight back against us.
Yeah, and you take a look at some of the other situations that developed. Even when USAID went in and they said, okay, we are going to pay to have a building done. We are going to pay to have a project. We're going to pay to have a school built. And down in Kandahar, we paid to have one of the schools built. Local warlord contracted, his friend who would go in and collect the bulk of the money. Now, if the school was actually built to any sort of specs, The eventual goal was it was going to be turned into a headquarters for a warlord. So you get a school, you get a madrasa, you build up, it's got nice solid walls, it's ready to move the kids in, and the warlord comes in and says, no, this is my headquarters now. And and it's actually an up-armored place. It's actually a defensible site. And we just gave it away. And really, come on, man. Ryan, good one. Percent of troops that can't wait.
Dude, they don't wait. Nobody waits. Like
one of the things I have
the active duty drug testing schedule is published. Like when your unit's getting a random drug test. It's like a good platoon sergeant lets his guys know when there's going to be a drug test coming up. People don't fucking wait.
Yeah. They'll self-report the night before and they'll get sent off to, it's like, as long as they self-report that they have a problem, before the morning the drug test is actually announced.
You get fucking 30 days of paid leave, R&R at a fucking recovery center.
Right. And it's like, well, he has PTSD. No, that wasn't PTSD. He was doing that before we deployed.
Yeah, no, the only person I've ever seen fail a fucking drug test that didn't have the opportunity to self-report first was they test in batch. So like we had a random drug test and somebody popped hot and they didn't know who it was because they just tested all in a batch. That just triggers an all unit. They test 100% of the unit the fucking next week. We had a full unit drug test on a Friday night. Everybody passed. Miracle. And then our regularly scheduled random selection drug test was Monday. We were out in the field that weekend. It wasn't weekend lib. We had a weekend FTX. We were out in the field the entire fucking time. And the first sergeant was like, fuck yeah, easiest drug test ever. And we had 2 people pop hot for cocaine when they were in the field the entire fucking time. And like the only thing that ran through my head, it wasn't one of my Joes, but I'm like, who the fuck brings cocaine on an FTX and doesn't share? like that was the only thing that ran through my mind. I was like, who the fuck doesn't share when they bring coke on an FTX?
Oh man. The other side of this, with regards to the ANA, I had 2 troops, and this was one of those fucked up things. I had a colonel who was in charge of the unit, and the colonel was an economics major, and he was working on his economics doctorate. And he decided he was going to do a thesis paper on cross-border economics, and he sent soldiers, some of my soldiers, to the border to count trucks. Right? Justin's got, yeah. Anyway, so don't trust his paper because I know for sure that the data that my guys collected was pure bullshit. They count one day and then fudge the numbers for the rest of the week.
It's called the margin of error.
Right? It's called the margin of error.
The law of estimates.
The thing is they'd be down on the border. They'd be responsible for counting the trucks, but they'd be co-located with the ANA that were supposed to be providing security. And literally the entire time, every member of the ANA that was at the border post with them were smoking dope. They were smoking opium and they were fucking wasted. There's no security there. There's no checkpoint. If they do anything, people responsible for moving the drugs, already know who's getting paid and who needs to be paid off in order to make sure things happen. It's no surprise.
Especially when you're like rules of engagement prohibit you from actually stopping them doing it anyways.
Right. You're robbing those. Okay. Yeah, I guess. Keep robbing them.
I can't stop you.
And if I actually ask you if you're robbing them, you're going to tell the translator that you aren't. And yeah, anyway. The whole thing was a joke, a straight up joke from the get go.
The country's
we
a
had
joke.
some good
War is a
engagements.
joke.
We had some good people in good places, but at the end of the day, we just were never consistent enough in our application of force, in our application of aid to do anything. One of our jokes about Korea is we haven't been in Korea for 75 years. We've been in Korea 75 times, or for 1 year, 75 times. And in a lot of ways, that's exactly what we were in Afghanistan. We have not been in Afghanistan 20 years. We've been in Afghanistan 1 year, 20 times.
Here's the fun one. Bring up Marvin's last question.
Oh, Marvin, what was your last?
If you wanted to become a merc or a contractor, would Afghanistan be the place to make contacts and get the next gig working for CIA, MI6, the Taliban? How would it work being a U.S. citizen? Marvin, the answer is, if you want to become a merc or a contractor as a U.S. citizen and you don't have a resume that says you served in at least a tier 2 or higher special forces unit, you're shit the fuck out of luck. Not gonna happen. They'll pay you $100,000 for a 6-month deployment, no fucking problem. If you can say you were an Army Ranger, you were a Navy SEAL, you were Marine Force Recon, you were Delta, you were Green Beret. If you were CIA Combat Applications Group, you're already doing it. So who the fuck cares? But they're not gonna pay somebody without that kind of experience and that kind of fucking training any more than they're going to pay the fucking Venezuelans. And the Venezuelans get paid like $100 a day to be body fodder. Not worth it. Academy won't hire you, and the Venezuelans will outbid you for anyone else.
Yeah. Now, there are some other options if you want to be a CIA analyst. But again, that's back to the same situation. You need to spend time in a military unit having been trained military analysts, or have been, a member of the FBI or, some other organization along those lines. As a civilian, moving straight into the system, no, never going to happen. You already need to have a history of being able to lie on behalf of your country before they will even look at you.
It used to be. It used to be where civilians could get an inroad just because you were really, really good, really, really competent, like good white hat hackers would be hired through contractors like Booz Hamilton, like Boeing. Edward Snowden put a stop to all that because they fucked up and they hired a guy with a conscience.
Yeah.
So they don't do that anymore.
No. Oh man.
So Justin, you became a good guy in Boston during the Boston bombing because you realized you were on. Well, why don't you tell that story real quick?
So, Patriots Day 2013. I mean, and this is a standard security mission. Like, it wasn't the first time I'd done this mission. It was an every year fucking thing. The Massachusetts National Guard would put out a request for volunteers to do security in Boston. I always fucking did it because it was a day's pay. It was super easy. I was in college at the time. So super easy security mission, day's pay, force of presence. And then afterwards, you're already in fucking Boston and the frat kids just fucking funnel fucking liquor down your throat. It's wicked fun. Great fucking time.
Wicked fun.
Yeah. 2013 was not wicked fun. 2013, we were wrapping up. It was actually near the end of the day. Like, we were pulling security. Like, they don't have security. Before 2013, they didn't keep security on the marathon route after elite runners finished. Like, you get 10,000 people running that marathon. After the first 1,000 cross the finish line, they call it a fucking day and they pull security. Everyone else finishes at their own time and pace, and there's no security for them. But as we were wrapping up, we were pulling checkpoints, we were getting stuff ready to go. All of a sudden, boom! It's like, well, fuck, guess we're not going anywhere. And that was a hectic 45 fucking minutes. That was some of the more hectic 45 minutes of my life, was that mass evac. Actually incredible. It goes down in the history books as the largest mass casualty terrorist attack with the fewest deaths in history. And it's the only terrorist attack to take place in the past 20 years where not a single person who made it to a hospital died.
Wow.
The only 3 deaths happened on site. They were instant deaths at the bombing. Nobody who made it to a hospital died. And they got all patriotic about it after the fact. The news was like, oh my God, look at these fucking heroes. Look what people did. They had video of us carrying people, like ripping sleeves off our shirts to make makeshift tourniquets and shit on the spot. The paramedics were going nuts. And people were finishing the marathon and running an extra mile to Mass General to donate blood. Like, it was actually incredible. Like, the response was incredible. Like, everybody's training kicked in. Nobody panicked. Everybody did their fucking jobs. And it was something I'd never seen before in the military. You always have one person who fucking panics, one person who doesn't know what's going on. But that day in Boston, it wasn't. It was a couple months later, July 4th, we got another call for a security mission. Again, standard security mission, 4th of July. They want troops to do security in Boston. And I'm like, sure, I'll do it. Except I had made the mistake of, on Patriots Day, I ended up being the highest ranking guy from my unit, which was terrible. It was absolutely fucking awful. And that ended up with me being in charge of people when all that shit happened. I fucking hated it. And later that night, there was a colonel. I can't remember his name off the top of my head of me, but he was giving us a briefing on the Boston Common. He said the words, "If they look brown, detain them." That night got a little bit crazy. A lot of civil rights violations happened that night. It was a lot of detaining people and dragging them to the Boston police, just because their ID didn't say they lived where they were. Boston's a college town. A lot of people IDs don't say they live there. Right. 4th of July, I ended up again being the highest ranking person for my unit to volunteer. Didn't know that ahead of time. I was very upset when we got there and I found out. And they attached me to some second lieutenant. They're like, this lieutenant, you're going to be with O'Donnell. I'm like, motherfucker. Like, this guy, 22 years old, the ink is still wet on his college degree. He had literally gotten his commission 2 weeks prior. He had just graduated college. And like, I'm like, I can't fucking believe this. And then he said the smartest words I have ever heard an officer in the Army say. All right, O'Donnell, you're in charge. I'm like, oh, we got a smart lieutenant here. Sweet. But it ended up not being like a typical day. Like, typical 4th of July was just you're around, you're just your radios, keeping extra eyes for the Boston PD, whatever. This time we had checkpoints, we had barricades, we had mobile surveillance cameras all around the city. We had a big facial recognition net going. We had a checkpoint on every single footbridge going onto the Esplanade. People weren't allowed on unless they were thoroughly searched. People were being turned away. We detained a deaf guy because we couldn't understand what he was saying. He was signing at us and we didn't have an interpreter, so we just detained him and turned him over to the police. But at one point, I'm walking with a lieutenant around lunchtime to go deliver water and food to the Joes that are doing the checkpoints. And mind you, like, it was not just Army and Boston PD. There was state police, there was FBI, DEA, ATF, TSA, and they called in mutual aid from like 30 to 40 surrounding towns for police officers. There was K-9 units, there was a Coast Guard and Navy bomb disposal units on site. There was a Department of Homeland Security chemical warfare unit on site. Like, it was massive. And as I'm walking with the lieutenant to go deliver water to these guys, this dude just like pulls up a lawn chair and sits down in the middle of the fucking sidewalk directly underneath one of our camera units. We had the mobile camera unit set up all over the city, and just starts blocking the path. And the lieutenant starts screaming at him. He's like, "You're blocking the path. You'll be detained." And like, the motherfucker's just sitting there reading a book, and I burst into tears laughing, and I just fucking lose it. And the lieutenant's like, "What's so funny, O'Donnell?" Like, he's fucking reading 1984. And the lieutenant's like, "Why is that funny?" And I start explaining the plot of 1984 to the second lieutenant. And as I'm like halfway through explaining the plot of 1984, I just look at the dude and I'm like, fuck. We're the bad guys. Like,
are we the baddie? Are we the baddie?
It's like I felt like the Nazi who finally realized, oh, we got skulls on our hats. We must be the bad guys.
Do you have a story like that, Joe? How did you? Was it a slow transformation, or was it a moment like that, or what? How do you?
Part of it was I'd been in long already. I had been in for about 6 years before 9/11. I was in Afghanistan, or I was in Korea when the planes actually hit the tower. And we had just finished up doing an exercise with the South Koreans, Ulchi focus lens or something like that, where it was a joint operation. We had U.S. intelligence, Korean intelligence, the different forces, Air Force, Navy, Army were all provided, and we were all involved in working this scenario, the scenario of, North Korea crosses the berm. And we'd finished that up and we're packing everything up and getting it all put back away so we could resume normal operations. And then we get the news, the towers have been hit. And I'm looking at it and going, okay, what's the significance of this? But we get the news and the camp goes in lockdown. And at the time I was living in Korea. Yeah, it's beer night.
Sorry, I
was living in
for the winter. I'll have it back.
Yeah, my ex was living in Korea with me, and we had our 2 oldest children there. So we had a place off post, and we got the go home, tell your family what's going on. And the ironic thing was my stepmother or my mother-in-law was there visiting at this exact time. And I remember walking into the apartment and telling my ex-wife and my mother-in-law, 2 planes just took down the World Trade Center. And my anti-authoritarian, anti-capitalist mother-in-law looks at me and goes, good.
Damn.
And I'm like, okay, not the response I was expecting. But 2 months later, I am leaving Korea. I stopped flying to Boise, visit my family. My ex-wife has already left 2 weeks before I did. She's in Maine with her family. So here I am. I'm driving across country, in order to go to my assignment at Fort Drum, New York. And, driving cross country, and you take the little detours off and you're going through every little city, every little town, every little ville. Just off, and you see streets lined with U.S. flags. And it was probably the most surreal time in my life, watching all of this very visible nationalism everywhere I went. And it's like, but I still spent another 11 years in the service, still spent another 11 years as an intelligence analyst, working Afghanistan for 3 of those tours, Iraq for 1 of them, and just doing the job, and you see the slow deterioration. You realize that you're never really accomplishing anything. And if you are on the inside of the machine, your ability to actually neutralize some of the damage, you start to realize that you're not doing it as well as you thought you were.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that's really stuck with me is like, as I look back on shit, has been the blind nationalism, the blind patriotism, and like how willing people are to respond to tragedy with just support, like blindly, like without any evaluation of what went wrong or who's actually to blame. It's just support those in power. Because like, I remember the night after the Marathon bombing, we had set up a command center on Boston Common. Army, Mass Police, State Police, and Boston Police. And like over the course of the night, new agencies started filtering in, but like that's where we had centered our command and control for the lockdown of the city. And we ended up locking down like 3 neighboring towns as well over the course of the manhunt.
Right.
But like throughout the whole lockdown, the Dunkin' Donuts on Park Street, I'll never forget that Park Street in Boston, there's a Dunkin' Donuts and a McDonald's and a Burger King just right there on the corner near the Park Street Church. Everyone else had closed. Every other business had shut down, sent people home. The Dunkin' Donuts called in all of their staff, and they did a 24-hour shift and pulled. And literally every 20 minutes, a new box of Joe was delivered to our command center. And the Dunks girls were just walking across the street with coffee for us all fucking night.
You're literally watching 19, 20-year-old clerks walking across the street into a command post full of up-armored military Joes, all jacked up on testosterone and rippets and whatever else. Here's more caffeine.
Right. No, I'm not gonna lie. We needed the fucking caffeine. Like that was a rough fucking night. Like Joe will appreciate this more than I think chat will, but I'll never forget the interaction I had the next morning. I was sitting there, there was a stray dog on the Boston Common, and it was the point where I had zoned out. I was so fucking exhausted. I was just sitting there playing fetch with this stray dog, and it was the happiest dog in the fucking world. And then a bus rolled up. It was fucking more troops coming in. It was a fucking MP unit rolling in to supplement us, and blew my goddamn mind. The first person off that bus is a command sergeant major. And she's about 5'2", a little bit rotund because sergeant majors can get away with that shit. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, fucking fantastic. Sergeant major's here. And she just beelines to me, looks at me and is like, oh, Donald, what the fuck are you doing? Why the fuck aren't you clean shaven? I'm like, really? Like a day and a half worth of fucking stubble at that point. I'm like, that's your big concern now? Like we have an ongoing manhunt. There's 3 dead people, a dead cop, and it's like we're about to lock down another city and send people with guns to go actually hunt someone fucking down door to door. You're concerned that I didn't find time to shave.
You would have to know whether or not her Kevlar was made out of styrofoam, would you?
Oh man, she was Vermont National Guard. I remember that much.
Vermont National. Okay, so yeah. Okay, got it.
But I'm like, motherfucker, and I lost it, but fortunately there was a female E6 recruiter who'd showed up. She's one of the recruiters in Boston, and she showed up in the middle of the night to fucking didn't get a call that her guard unit didn't get activated. She just put on her uniform and showed up. I'm like, thank fucking God, I'm not the highest ranking enlisted person anymore. But she walked in, and I hand her my clipboard with the rosters. I'm like, you're in charge now, ma'am. And she's like, don't you ever fucking call me ma'am. I'm like, till tomorrow. And but no, she came to my defense. She comes screaming out of the fucking command center and just fucking dressed down a sergeant major for having the balls to belittle me. And I had a new appreciation for female NCOs on that day.
Yeah, there are some good ones. There are a lot of good ones that actually came out of 2000, those early deployments, what was going on. But yeah, it's just crazy, the entire time, all the missteps, all the screw ups, from the top down. And yet we're saying, support the troops. And, and it's funneling money into people who are literally incompetent, arrogant, just generating more mistakes faster than, the Joes can go around and solve the mistake, clean up the messes behind them. The early ones, the older ones who were still raised on body counts from Vietnam, still thought the way to win the war was, how many people we could kill,
Hey, they might have been onto something. Honestly, hey, I'm an anti-war guy. I'm a peacenik at heart. I don't think we should be going to war. But when I look at war from a tactical perspective, if you're going to acknowledge the fact that a war can and should be fought at any point, it means politics has fucking failed. It means you have failed to find any potential common ground. You don't win a war by fucking restraining your warfighters and not letting them win the war. You win a war by firebombing Dresden, Germany, and burning a civilian capital to the fucking ground. You win a war through collateral damage. You make it so untenable for the opposition to continue that you win a war. I used to get in an argument with Georgian soldiers all the time. because they were fucking cocky sons of bitches.
Yeah.
And they're always like, we're better than the Americans. I'm like, how the fuck you better than Americans? Your fucking country's smaller than my state, you stupid fuck. And they're like, we fought the conventional war against Russia and didn't lose. I'm like, you didn't win either. They're like, but we didn't lose. Georgia didn't lose that war because when Russia invaded and took Tbilisi, the Georgian army shed their uniforms, picked up their rifles, marched into Russia, and took a bunch of schools hostage. They were willing to make that war untenable for Russia to continue fighting.
Well, yeah, and that was one of the things the Taliban were doing. You know, they were doing their best to make sure, you know, Malaya, you know, when the Taliban went into Pakistan, into the federated regions, stopped a school bus full of schoolgirls, and then shot a little girl in the head. You know, it was a PR piece for them. You know, that was saying we are willing to kill our girls in order to get the U.S. out. Now, of course, people responsible for the U.S., you know, invasion, you know, what's a little brown girl in Pakistan worth to us? You know, keep the troops there. Keep moving on. You know, I mean, Jesus, we were bombing hospitals ourselves.
Isn't this kind of an American fantasy? The casualty, the civilian casualty-less war, like the idea that we're just killing the bad guys, and
it is. It's straight up friggin' war porn masturbation material.
It's an utter fantasy. The only war that's conceivable that can be fought without civilian casualties would be a naval war. And
is that an American fantasy, or did you see it everywhere else? Do you think
it's a Western fantasy? It's the fucking it's the woke culture of fucking peaceniks invading NATO and Europe, and everyone wants to be better. And unfortunately, it is a byproduct of the evolution of rules of war and fucking the Geneva Conventions, and
most of which the U.S. isn't even signed on to.
No, but the U.S. does acknowledge them and adhere to them as international customs. And U.S. is actually the arbitrating and enforcing agent of most of them, even though they haven't signed them. And that's written right into the fucking law. It's fucking wild. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. It's actually a military treaty. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea is a military treaty between the 138 signatory states of the United Nations on the policing of open waters and anti-piracy and how naval warfare should be conducted. And it has a clause in the treaty that says it shall be enforced by the United States Navy, and the U.S. is not a signatory to the treaty.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of where I went from the idea of a just war to, just realizing that all war is bullshit. Unless, like you said, unless you're in such a dire situation that everything else has failed, because war is politics right now. You're right. Like, war should be after politics is falling apart, but it's just part of what we do because
it's part of politics. Literally, it's gunboat diplomacy. It's the way the United States has been doing things ever since friggin' Hawaii.
So look at the first invasion of Iraq. Look at the first invasion of Iraq and how that went down. The United States said, okay, we're committing troops. We're going to end this atrocity in Kuwait. And the moment they told Schwarzkopf go, he went so fast and so furiously that he was able to end the war before he received instructions on rules of engagement. In 96 hours from being said go to the Iraqi army surrendering unconditionally. And he did that by committing absolutely atrocious war crimes that no one will ever be tried for because the United States won the war. Mm-hmm. War criminals are only punished if they're on the losing side.
Right.
That's the inherent thing. But when the Iraqi army was in full fucking retreat, had laid down their weapons and was in full retreat, he sent A-10s and Apache helicopters to murder thousands of people in a retreating convoy. It took pictures of it and dropped them in leaflets over Baghdad saying, do you want this to happen to you?
Yeah.
They surrendered.
Yeah. But that's the thing is how willing are you to commit atrocities? And while we had the authorization of use of military force for the Kuwait rescue, which is ultimately what that was we were preserving, an ally's oil reserve, and we were slowing the flow of oil into the U.S. in order to maximize profits.
No, it's worse than that. If you ever want to say it was a war for oil, it was a war for oil profits, never a war for oil resources. Because Saddam Hussein offered the United States a deal. He would continue to sell the United States oil at $15 a barrel in perpetuity if they stayed out of Kuwait.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be looking at 50-cent gallons of gas right now had we stayed out of Kuwait.
Yep. And here we are. What are we at? 4.25, 4.5 now?
It's been up to 6.
Yeah.
Okay, so Marvin, you got a question here.
All right. Yeah. So they already know. I've already talked about this, but why don't we hear you? 9/11. What happened? Complete. Was it no planes? Was it planes with bombs in the building?
Right.
Terrorists? What was it?
I'm not going to go on about fucking the cameras or Building 7 or shit I don't know about. I will tell you, every modern skyscraper is built to fall in on its own footprint by design. If anything's to happen to its structural integrity, that's done to keep them from damaging neighboring buildings. So yeah, something might have happened with Building 7 because Buildings 1 and 2 were specifically designed to fall and not damage Building 7. False flag? No. The United States government is incompetent. The only false flag might be the fact that the Israeli intelligence services provided intel on it and they didn't act. People want to say not inaction is a false flag. Maybe. Hawaii, Pearl Harbor was the same thing. The U.S. Army had intelligence that the Japanese fleet was moving on Pearl Harbor and failed to pass it on to the Navy.
Or did the Navy refuse to acknowledge it? Yeah,
it doesn't make it malicious as much as it is incompetent. I will never believe it's an inside job because I've known people who work for the government. The United States government is too inept to carry out something like that and keep it under wraps. If that was a government operation, you'd have whistleblowers, you would have people on TV selling their stories, you'd already have people writing books about their involvement and selling them for movie deals. There's no way in the modern era the government could keep that under wraps. Osama did it? Probably a bunch of fucking pissed off Muslims who exploited a flaw in private security. Really fucking easy. Every one of those planes flew out of Boston's Logan Airport. Logan Airport is notorious for having some of the worst security in the world, even in post 9/11 era. There used to be a reporter in Boston who tried to fuck with them every single year. On the anniversary of 9/11, he would try and sneak weapons past security. He made it 18 years before getting caught. And like he would take pictures in the bathroom in the terminal. Here's my gun. Here's my knives of shit he got through TSA in Boston. Not that fucking difficult. I made it through TSA in Boston with a fucking knife on my belt when I was on orders. Completely oblivious. Forgot about it. They caught me with it in Atlanta and lost their goddamn minds. But TSA in Boston didn't fucking pick up shit. As a complex, as a gift, it was a gift. The Taliban actually offered to turn over Osama bin Laden for trial 2 days before the U.S. invasion.
Mm-hmm.
And George Bush said it was an unnegotiable position and launched the invasion anyways.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the towers were real. The need for the war, non-existent. Okay, we used the towers to justify something that we refuse. The Taliban offered us Osama, multiple times. The Taliban offered, accommodations for U.S. military operations several times. The Taliban were extremely, cooperative. And we literally told them, nah, dude, fuck off. We're going to kill you.
And the other thing, I saw in an earlier comment, Marvin had asked about the military readiness and how long it took to get jets up in the air. I don't think you understand how poor military readiness was before 9/11 in this country. Like the stand down orders, like even the planes that did get up were unarmed. There are great interviews out there with a couple of the pilots that flew out of Peace in New Hampshire to New York to try and do security patrols over New York. Those jets that they got up in were unarmed, and they were told, once they got up in the air, one of the pilots was asked, like, what the fuck are we supposed to do? And they were told, hope your ejection seat works.
Wow.
Like, They were instructed to use their planes as missiles if the need came to it, because they were unarmed, because that was the status of military readiness in the United States at that time. And there was a no-fly zone enforced over the United States for 2 weeks after 9/11, and it was not the United States Air Force that enforced it. It was the Italian Air Force answering a mutual aid call from the NATO treaty. Like,
who flew the planes into the building? Ryan.
a bunch of pissed off Muslims.
A bunch of pissed off Muslims. I mean, literally. There's a number of different scenarios, and every one of them is viable, but ultimately it was Pakistanis recruited by either the Saudis or the Israelis, or some combination of the two. There is a process for creating suicide bombers. There's a process for all of that, where they would bring people in. The imams would find people who are suicidal, who want their 72 virgins in their war against, and they recruit, they groom, and then they send them off. And they happen to find about a half dozen of them, that were ready to actually do this and were intelligent enough and capable enough to actually take control over the planes. But there was a grooming process in this that, probably took the better part of 2 years.
No, I did not drop acid tonight. I like to take a month off between doing those. It's good to give your brain a reset after you exercise only makes you stronger if you rest for recovery afterwards.
So you guys probably saw Biden signed an executive. I didn't read all the article, but he signed an executive order to release the 9/11 documents related to Saudi Arabia, funding the state of Saudi Arabia. What do you guys think is going to come out in that?
Nothing.
Like, you might get like they had evidence that a particular Saudi prince was giving money to bin Laden and the terrorists. But what's come of that? There's an equal chance that Saudi prince is dead now. And if he's not dead, he's on the board of an oil company and untouchable.
Mm-hmm.
So the Taliban is the most well-funded private army in the world.
At this point, yes, without a doubt.
Well, not even private anymore. So now they are
public. It is the army of Afghanistan.
They are officially state actors now.
Yes. Yeah, which makes it so much more fun.
The question on blue on there, blue on blue incidents, you really got to define what you believe a blue on blue incident is. If you define blue on blue as Allied forces versus Allied forces, and blue on green as Allied forces versus local Allied forces, blue on blue is very uncommon. The handful of instances of blue on blue incidents in Afghanistan over the past 20 years have been so heavily publicized that everyone fucking knew about it. Pat Tillman was the one they tried to cover up. Yeah, it was a blue on blue fight where the Rangers misidentified another Ranger patrol and got into a firefight with themselves. Blue on green, so NATO forces versus Afghan forces all the fucking time. I had a good friend. I had a good friend. He wasn't in my unit. He was a kid I went to school with. He deployed well after, and he was a medic in Kandahar who was killed by an Afghan police officer. He was on base. Afghan police officer was armed on base in the PX, and this kid was just shopping off duty and ended up getting shot in the back by an Afghan police officer. Like, that happens all the time because the police and the army were the Taliban the whole fucking time.
Yeah, green on green, joint operations, you see green on green attacks all the time, green on blue, blue on green. It was a mess. And it was interesting, especially when you see some of the things that they decided to fight over.
Women,
boys.
Yeah. Oh, my favorite was there was a fucking a marriage proposal that an ANA fucking captain disagreed with, but it happened to be the nephew of the ANP local police chief. And so the local police and local army went had a fucking big shootout in the middle of town over a wedding.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's the tribal affiliation again. It's the network. It's who's entitled to what, who's got which association with the tribal lands. Who's got land primacy based on tribal affiliation versus who's running the country, who's got the strongest army, who's got the most, who's able to do the most damage at any given time to any of the other tribes. Like I was talking about General Razik. If I remember right, he was Norzai, which of course was what the president was at the time. Hamid Karzai, they were from Norzai tribe. So you saw the chain of corruption. It was family based. It was tribal based. Went all the way from Kabul, clear down into Kandahar, clear into Quetta in Afghanistan. You saw the crime, you saw the corruption, and literally money would allow one tribe to go in and kill, all the men in another tribe, and money would just settle the debt.
Yep.
So if you had the right influence, if you had the right income, resources, if you had the U.S. support,
Michael wants to know what I mean by Taliban were the police. It's not ignorant. It's not ignorant, Michael. I'll explain why. As Joe just explained, Afghanistan is a country of tribes. Each tribe controls a region, and they have their own history, their own culture, and their own customs. The Pashto are the largest of those tribes. The Pashto are a plurality of the population of Afghanistan. The Pashto are not the Taliban, but the Taliban is mostly comprised of Pashto volunteers. And the Pashto as a people largely support the Taliban. And since they are the plurality of the population, they have a very strong representation in the local police forces, the local army forces, because they were hired in those roles to serve for American dollars. And many police officers in Afghanistan and many Afghan National Army personnel were members or sympathizers of the Taliban off the books.
Yeah, and this even goes further because you're looking at the affiliation. If they knew enough English, they learned enough English talking to the Americans at the clerk or at the market, they'd become interpreters, and literally you would have an English-speaking Terp who is, either still native Afghani or in some cases, they hadn't been completely naturalized, but we hired them from the U.S. and brought them in, and they still had their tribal affiliations. And they would literally look a lieutenant in the eye or a captain in the eye and bald-faced lie about how a rival tribe had done something. And then we call in an airstrike, and next thing you know, their tribe now has extra land. You can't win when you're
extra land, extra
corruption.
money, extra women, extra kids, extra rifles. Everything is commoditized to those people.
Right down to lives. Yeah.
So if you guys could be in charge right after Trump negotiated with the Taliban, what was that, last January? I'm getting that fucked up. It was January 2020, right?
Yeah.
What would you do? What would you have done differently than Trump did from that point on? And then when Biden became president, what would you have done from the point he became president?
I would have set a staged withdrawal process. Not like, so what they did was they evac everybody from where they were. And okay, you're in Kandahar, you're flying out of Kandahar. You're in Ghazni, you're flying out of Ghazni. You're in Kabul, you're flying out of Kabul. No, at that point, it's a movement to contact. You have a negotiated ceasefire that the Taliban was honoring and openly declaring that they were honoring until the end of May to get all U.S. troops out of the country. You move every single U.S. troop and every single piece of equipment to Kandahar, the largest airfield that we controlled, and you get everything there. You start evacuating the troops and anything that you can't take, because everyone knew we weren't going to be able to take everything. There's a reason why they sell M1 Garands for $80 in Korea, because so many fucking hundreds of thousands of them were left behind. It's standard protocol when withdrawing from a theater is to leave equipment. It's no fucking. It's cheaper to replace it than to ship it back. But put people on the fucking planes, get them out of fucking Kandahar, and the moment you have the last boot off the ground in Kandahar, you send in a strike force of fucking B-1 bombers, and you level that airfield to the ground with everything on it, rendering it unusable.
Yep. You might be nice and actually give the local, camp town that grew up around the base enough notice to evacuate. It's like, you guys got 1 week, go visit family down in, somewhere, but you don't want to be within 5 miles of this location by this day. But Justin brings up a point. We were actually in a position where we could have staged out of all 3 locations. We had the airport in Kabul, we had the airport in Kandahar, we had the airport in Bagram. And literally, we would have had to have airshipped everything into Kandahar before shipping it out. Or we literally just could have flown the planes in, lifted it out of Bagram, and dropped it in Turkey. Taken the planes, flown back in, and just persistently move the high-value equipment out, as well as the high-value people. Now, where the mistake is the Joint Chiefs of Staff literally cock-blocked Trump. They said, election's coming up. Biden will let us stay. So they didn't do shit.
Right.
They didn't do shit. They know the protocol. They could have staged an evacuation. Every one of the colonels that was in charge of a base command there had the plan, had the protocol, could have started moving the planes out, moving the equipment out, back in January. Even if they'd waited till June, they would have been able to get everything out.
So I'm not a big fan of laws and prohibitions on things, as we all fucking know. But if somebody were to suggest a law to Congress, I know they had a ban on lobbyists. They banned members of Congress from becoming lobbyists for like 5 years after they leave Congress. If there were a ban on anybody leaving the military above the rank of major from taking a position on the board or as a lobbyist for a defense contractor for 10 years, it'd be incredible.
Oh yeah. I mean, huge. And that was one of the other things, Secretary of Defense, General Lloyd Austin, he got out of the Army, retired, moved straight into the board of the defense contract, and from the board of the defense contract moved into the SecDef position. Okay. Yeah. Part of me wants to lay this at his feet, but honestly, Joint Chiefs of Staff screwed this up long before he was appointed to the position.
Also, we have a mandatory retirement age for generals. Why don't we have a mandatory retirement age for politicians? Pixie's trying to get me kicked off of Twitter again. All right.
Oh, dude, Ruby,
if you're not familiar with my Twitter debacle, I was recently kicked off of Twitter for 12 hours for calling Meghan McCain a cunt. But that was following 10,000 people reporting a tweet in which I said Timothy McVeigh did nothing wrong. And I stand by that fucking statement.
Well, you gave a caveat afterward. You said he should have.
Okay, he should have waited for daycare to get out. We can all agree on that. The children did nothing wrong, but their parents may have deserved what was coming to them.
Ruby Ridge and Waco, those are 2 other things. And this is another problem that I have with the current administration. Okay, Ruby Ridge, what was that, 99? No, that was 80.
I'll look it up. I don't even remember.
Okay, because Ruby Ridge happened before Waco. And the irony was Bill Barr was the Attorney General for Ruby Ridge. And during both Waco and Ruby Ridge, Senator Joe Biden was the Senate chair for the Senate Judiciary's Affairs Committee. So he had oversight of the Department of Justice under both Bill Barr and Janet Reno for both of those incidences and gave both of those incidences clean oversight bill of health. Fuck Biden. So Biden's incompetence, goes way back. I didn't dig too much into what his role was in Oklahoma City, but yeah. But as far as Ruby Ridge, Ruby Ridge happened here in Idaho. So it's one of those, I'm fairly familiar with growing up and understand that the FBI, Department of Justice, and the ATF created a scenario that didn't need to happen. And they gave medals to a man for assassinating a child and shooting a woman in the face while she was carrying her baby. Why that man wasn't tried for crimes against humanity? Well, that was Department of Justice covering their ass. They had to give the man medals in order, to keep from the reality of the situation sitting into the nation as a whole. Same with Waco. We got the freaking gun grabber jackass who's been put in charge of the ATF now, from Waco.
I thought they stopped him. Didn't they stop Chipman because he said something mean to a woman?
Maybe they did. Maybe they did.
That's what it takes. So that goes to prove that white women must not be stopped. They must be weaponized. I'm starting to become more in that argument because they are effective.
We need to weaponize white women.
All you white women in the chat. I heard Joe Bish. I heard Joe might have sniffed you.
So were you guys? So this is what I thought when I heard of the, when I heard Trump make the deal with the Taliban last January, I thought, okay, this is a political stunt. He told us he was going to end these wars. He hasn't ended a single one. So he's purposefully putting this beyond his presidency so he can just say, see, I'm trying to leave. That's what I thought at the time. And I thought if he gets reelected, there's no fucking way he's actually going to leave. Something's going to happen and he's going to say, never mind. And it was just all going to be for looks.
Well, here's the wild fucking thing. I believed him because for the first time in my life, there was a president who was elected and kept trying to do the things he ran on.
Sure.
They weren't good things for the most part, like building a fucking wall, deporting millions of people, like stripping away civil rights protections. Okay, not great things, but he was trying to do them. Like, wow, he's actually fucking doing what he said he was going to do. This is fucking wild. And so when like the negotiation for withdrawal came, I'm like, fuck yeah. Like, he was already the best president of my lifetime because he didn't start a new war. Right. Like, he was going to become the first president in my lifetime to end a war.
Yeah, so that's where it got weird. So, like, that's what I thought about Trump, and I had much lower expectations for Biden. So, Biden becomes president. He cancels the deal with the Taliban. And I was like, okay, fuck, we're literally never leaving. This is all gone. And then over the last few weeks, I just couldn't believe that he committed to pulling out. So were you guys surprised that he actually followed through with it? Or what did you think was going to happen?
I was shocked. And I'm going to say, so that morning, like that I talked about, when I was sitting there watching the news, watching the helicopters land on the embassy, when I had the fucking, oh God, it's fucking Saigon. I had like the breakdown, like, Jesus fucking Christ, what was all this for? A tweet comes up at some point. It's like, Joe Biden will address the nation regarding Afghanistan at 3 p.m. Like, oh, looks like we're not fucking leaving. I was completely ready for Biden to say, shit's gone south. We need to go back in and secure it. And then I watched Biden's speech, and I was sitting here like, oh, fucking yeah. Fuck yeah. Like, Biden just became the best president of my lifetime. Really low bar that Trump set, but like really low bar the Trump set that Biden fucking passed it. Like, holy fucking shit. He ended a war. And like, It was almost like I wrote Biden's speech. Like, he was saying shit that I would have wrote in that speech. Like, well, fuck you, Afghanistan. Get fucked. Your problem. Like, we're not fucking dealing with it. Like, we've already spent too much money, too much time Too many
8
lives.
trillion, man, 8 trillion.
He's like, if you're not willing to fight for yourselves, we're not fighting for you. So I'm like, oh my God, like Biden's speechwriter deserves a fucking award for this. This is incredible. Like I'm sitting here like cheering for Joe Biden, and Twitter's like, don't get ahead of yourself, dude. Don't get ahead of yourself. I'm like, he's saying the things, man. He's saying the right fucking things. I talked to Shu that night. That was the night I had Shu on.
Yeah, right.
And I was talking to Shu about it, and like she's like, I don't believe it.
I was having trouble, dude. This whole time, I've just been wondering, okay, what's the ulterior motive here? Like, where there's going to be a terrorist attack, and we're going to be invading Russia or something. I've just been like, because I just don't get it. Because I, like you, every step of the way, I thought, okay, something's going to happen. Then when ISIS-K attacked us, I was like, oh, that's it. That's going to be, and still like, nope, we're out. And I'm just like, I don't know. It's been surprising.
Here's the thing. I think there were probably 2 speeches that were prepared. Okay, one was for us to go back in, and the other was for a complete withdrawal. However, when we lost Afghanistan in 4 days, and we literally watched the ANA that we had spent 20 years training turn over and swear allegiance to their tribal Taliban leaders, the shadow government that we had been fighting for 20 years, just overnight turned around and became, the new rulers of every community in Afghanistan. Joe looked at the situation. The generals looked at the situation. General Austin looked at the situation and went, there is no way we can justify to the American people, even with the death of 13 Marines, there is no way we can justify to the American people going in and trying to salvage this fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as Scott Horton said on my show, the only way we ever could have won was by carpet bombing all the southern provinces.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's it. 3 tours in there. I remember talking to several of the Americanized, translators who went to America, became nationalized, and then came back, to work as Terps with top secret clearances, and listen and say, I don't understand why you just don't glass it. Just
so the
get
key,
them off the list.
Another one to me was the elections. And this is where Iraq and Afghanistan really went different ways. Like, we can call Iraq a success in nation building. Unfortunately, we should have never done it, but we can actually call it a success. And I think it has a lot to do with before we invaded Iraq, and even throughout the course of the occupation of Iraq, Iraq wasn't a third world country. They were second world at worst. They had internet. They were educated people. And people were involved. They knew about their government. They knew how bad the government was. It was a minority ruling party. And when we went in there and we gave the Iraqi people government, a democracy, they had mass participation. People showed up to vote. People showed up to elect. People complained about the results and tried to protest and demand audits. The opposition, like the terrorist tribes and clans, ended up getting seats in parliament and just became a minority party in parliament. But like, they formed a functioning government and like made shit work. Whereas in Afghanistan, like, you go to do security at the polls on election day, people show up, they're illiterate, they can't read the ballot, they don't know what they're doing. The exit pollers are asking them who they're voted for. They're like, the 4th one down. Why'd you vote for them? The chief told me to. Like, and that's their view on things, is like, they look at it, all they know about politics in Afghanistan is that they have a president. The president's not dead, so shit must be okay. That's all that matters to the people in the tribes. Like, it's like, they just want to be left alone. They want to self-govern. They have self-governed for thousands of fucking years. Even through the course of our occupation, the tribes were largely self-governing. Even under the previous Taliban regime, the tribes were largely self-governing. Even under the previous democracy that the Soviets overthrew, the tribes were largely self-governing. And even under the king before that, they were largely self-governing. And they are not an educated people. They don't have infrastructure. They don't have education. You can't free someone who doesn't know they're a slave.
Well, the thing, okay, now here's the thing. I did 3 tours, and my job was taking a look at the culture and understanding what was going on. You take a look at the Northern Alliance, they own the valleys. Nobody went in. Nobody told them what to do. Now, we can't call them slaves because these people were independent. It may be tribal affiliation, but these people were independent. Afghanistan, even during our occupation, was essentially Ancapistan. Yeah. Every one of the tribes owned their own land. They ran things the way their community, based on their ideas, based on their culture. They owned it. They lived it. They breathed it. And nobody came in ever and told them to do it differently. Because if they did, they died. Yeah, even when we came in, we ran into that problem. We say, you need to do this. And they go, no, we don't. What's the incentive? But the Pashtuns, you got an awful lot of things within the culture of the Pashtuns that were really well developed. They got an idea called Pashtun-Wali. A Pashtun-Wali, it's guest rights. And literally, a stranger can walk into any village, and for 3 days, they'll be hosted. You'll get food, you'll eat, you'll have a safe place to sleep. Third day, you get asked what it is you're there for. Okay? If something can be arranged, something can be arranged. If not, you go on your way.
Yeah,
No
on the
harm,
flip
no foul.
side, On the flip side, it means the same people inviting you to dinner to negotiate peace and security for the village are the same ones digging the bombs trying to kill your Joes the next day.
Well, that's because you didn't honor the agreement and leave like they asked you to. But yeah, that's exactly what it is they're doing their best to honor the agreement based on the way that they understand you honored their agreement. And truth is at no time during our occupation did U.S. forces honor their agreement in any way, shape, or form, unless it was a special operations guy who actually married a Pashtun woman. Yeah, the tribal affiliate. But you know what happened to him. Yeah, that's what happens when you go native with from the U.S. Army or Marines. You go native, they say, yeah, no, that doesn't work. If you can't kill, the relatives of the woman you just married, we can't have you around.
Have you guys seen the clip of General Wesley Clark in October 2001? Pentagon memo: 7 nations eliminated in 5 years. I think we're fighting for Israel.
Yeah.
Our blood.
Yeah, that one keeps cycling around. And truth is there is always that plan. That there is a contingency plan for everything. With every one of the commands in how they can go in and actually conduct operations to conduct the war and completely conquer the country, or, every country. We have a plan like that against every country in the world. It exists. It gets reviewed every 5-10 years. And the latest plan modifications turn around and get dropped right back into the files.
And honestly, if the Department of Defense wasn't doing that, they wouldn't be doing their job.
Yeah.
Like their whole job. Let's face it, guys. The best offense is the best defense is a good offense. And if somebody's going to launch a strike on the U.S. at any point for whatever reason, the tactical answer, assuming politics have been put aside, is to eliminate their ability to launch a secondary strike. So if the Department of Defense is not making plans for China, for Indonesia, for Saudi Arabia, for even Israel, France, United Kingdom, Germany, then they're not doing their job.
Yeah. We got plans for every one of our allies, what we need to do and go in and replace the government if the government ever turns hostile against us. That's the job of the Department of Defense, to plan the counterattack, or if we actually get enough notice, do a preemptive strike in some situations. Right. The plans exist. They're on file. If you were to ever do a Freedom of Information, a FOIA Act, you could probably find some of the declassified versions of it, for every country in the world.
I love this one.
I have a sibling that served in Iraq twice out of patriotism, but afterward that sibling felt very different about the government. Still trusted their brothers and sisters, just not the people in charge.
So the United States government is one of the most effective brainwashing organizations in the world. And the military training programs that they put in place at places like Fort Benning, Fort Jackson, Parris Island, Great Lakes Training Academy, that they are really, really, really good at one of two outcomes. People will go into basic training and go into service in the military and go through all the brainwashing, all the routine, and come out one of two ways: super patriotic and ready to just follow orders, or super libertarian.
Here's one of the things. The U.S. military and the poverty draft. I know liberals, I know an awful lot of people say, the poverty draft isn't a real thing. Full fucking shit. The poverty draft exists. Okay. Reason why is because those people that are looking, those people who are desperate, who need an escape from their current reality, are ready for the brainwashing. And they already have a layer of trauma that can be imprinted upon. Okay. Basic training. It's a trauma bonding overwrite, man. It just adds another layer of trauma onto the complex trauma that you had as a kid. When dad slapped you around, now it's just a drill sergeant slapping you around.
And here's the thing. It's really hard to get out of the military.
It is.
It's incredibly, like, once you're in, it is really fucking hard to get out, especially if you do just straight active duty. Like, if you get out young enough where it's still feasible to go to college, transition to the National Guard, and have a couple year ramp down into civilian life, it works. But a lot of people don't get out that early. They stay in just long enough where it's too hard they're too old and it's too hard for them to go to college. They can't take the time off. At this point, they have a family. Their job is on base. The financial security of being able to have a house on base that yet you technically own as part of the homeowners association on base. That's where most of your wealth is tied up in, and your kids go to school on base, and your wife works on base. An army base is a modern day company town, and they make it so fucking hard for people to get out. Like, that's a big part of why we have such a high homeless veteran population, is guys who couldn't take it anymore. They get out, but they don't have the skills to transition, and there is no transitional help for them.
No, not really.
And that's actually one of my biggest fears about ending the wars, because we've seen huge economic growth over the past 20 years in places like Fort Drum, New York, like Columbus, Georgia, like Fayetteville, North Carolina, like Honolulu, Hawaii, where if we start drawing down our military forces to suit the state of warfare that we're actually fighting as these wars end, you're going to see like massive amounts of people who don't get the option of reenlistment because standards will go up, people will get chaptered out. It's like, we don't need you anymore. And those people don't have the skills. They don't have the training to find civilian work, to do the civilian transition, because the government and the military system has ingrained them and indoctrinated them into the company town lifestyle. And you're going to see massive amounts of homelessness and poverty, specifically in areas like Columbus, Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, Fayetteville, North Carolina, Fort Drum, New York, Great Lakes, Michigan, Honolulu, Hawaii, Seattle area in Washington. You're going to see these bases and the economies around the bases start to collapse.
Yeah, and the VA support network for people who aren't actually retiring out of the military isn't adequate. We got a program here in Boise. It's called Wyakin Warriors. Reason why Wyakin Warriors works here so well is because it's based off of the post 9/11 GI Bill. You get out, you turn around, they send you to a community college where it's cheap to go to school so that the loans from the GI Bill can cover your living expenses. You get the 2-year degree. As soon as you're done with the 2-year degree, they move you into the 4-year degree at Boise State University, which is a 4-year university. In addition to that, we have a regional VA here. So literally, we have a community college, we have a 4-year university, and we have a regional VA within 10-mile radius of each other. And literally, that is the only way that particular program has been able to be successful. And there are only about 4 places in the United States that meet those criteria: regional VA, 2-year college, 4-year college, as well as a community base that can support the influx. In addition to that, one of the things I love about Boise, we are an international refugee resettlement facility or location. Literally, we get 1% of our population brought in on an annual basis from refugees. We will see a surge in Afghan refugees here in Boise, Idaho. We will see a surge, over on the other side of the state. Those Afghan refugees, we will get some of them here in Boise. And we have veterans here. So literally, we may end up seeing interpreters that served with us in Afghanistan talking with people, U.S. service members. But we got that entire system here, but it is unique in so many ways, and it's problematic.
Joe, how did you feel about the LP Texas controversial tweet where they said, we'd rather have refugees from Afghanistan than from California?
I don't actually blame him. That is one of the things. Here's part of the problem that we got with the refugees from Afghanistan. Our standard of living here in the United States is artificially high. Okay, you give an Afghani a mud hut, he's happy. Yeah, you give a Californian a mud hut, that's not going to work.
Set it on fire, then it'll feel more like home. So.
Well, yeah, there is that. But I mean, most of the Afghans are already adjusted to rural lifestyles. You don't have that too many who are really accustomed, but they're also self-starters. You get them in the right area, you show them how to run a shop. Next thing you know, you got an Afghan restaurant downtown who's serving the best naan, with lamb on top of it. And they're running, a chain of Afghani restaurants, in Houston. But that's the difference between the independent nature of what's going on in Afghanistan versus what's become the American institutionalized deculturalization. Yeah, and as long as we continue to send our schools through the same deculturalization process that says this is the bare minimum you need to expect out of what's coming out of the U.S. at any time in the future, we're going to continue to have that problem that allows Americans to be exploited as well as being exploitative, for the near future. We start talking about how do we raise the next generation to be decent? Yeah, how do we?
So,
well, yeah. And that's one of those things, all it would take is one generation of American women keeping their kids at home educating them, and America would be a different world in 15 years.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. Like the military industrial complex is fueled by the Department of Education in so many different ways. One, by just like filling everyone's heads with bullshit about what America is, first of all. And then also what you said, like convincing them we need this artificially high form of lifestyle. And then convincing them that they have to go to college to be successful. But, the student loan program that we've had over the last 50 years now has just inflated the prices through the roof. So a lot of them have to go into the military to avoid.
Or start driving truck.
What's that?
Or start driving trucks.
Yeah, that's what I did instead. And I didn't go to school. But I mean, I don't know. Yeah, we got to end the Department of Education. It's such a problem in so many ways.
MD made a point there. MD, your cousin served out of the 1060th in Birmingham. 1060th is a great fucking unit. 1060th was the logistics unit that worked with mine. I was Yankee Division, 181st out of what was the name? Some fucking small ass fucking town I haven't been to in over a decade. But we were headquartered out of Worcester. It's a great unit. They're who we deployed with. They were our support and logistics. At that period of time, I'm going to assume it was the same period of time, they were so desperate for people. That was the surge because they couldn't hit recruiting numbers because the demand was so fucking high that they were offering people the fucking world. It was fucking $10,000 and $20,000 signing bonuses and a promotion in rank just to re-sign. When I got out, it was another year. It was a full fucking year of weekly calls from recruiters begging me to come back and offering me E6 if I'd come back. But now we're going to see the exact opposite. We're going to see them using fucking promotion point systems and PT scores to drum people out. It's going to be like, you're not in the top 20% for the people in your rank, so you don't get the re-enlistment option because there's not going to be a war for them to fight. And
the drug testing will be stepped up. Alcohol substance abuse programs will be an excuse to drum people out. PTSD coping behavior patterns. You get the MPs called on you once because you got in a screaming match with your wife. Boom, you're gone.
It's such a trap we've put ourselves in so many different ways economically because, like you said, you got the people who were employed by the military directly, but then also all the weapons contractors. What's that? BRAC, right? BRAC. Isn't that what it's called? BRACC. That's the having your own contractors in your own state. A lot of
BRAC is BRAC. The BRAC Commission is a Base Reauthorization and Closure Commission. the Senate, and there's I think it's a Senate commission that meets to every time the military needs to close a base or open a new one, they need BRAC commission to do it.
Oh yeah, right. That's
And
basis.
the BRAC commission just fucking politicizes the fuck out of the entire thing, and we're going to see that happening. If the drawdown is successful, if the war actually ends, and they find a need that there are too many troops on the payroll to fucking support the budget, the budget can't support it moving forward, they're going to have to start closing bases, and they're going to go to BRAC, and they're going to be like, we need to close this base, and BRAC is going to fight tooth and nail because every senator on that fucking committee has a state that they represent, and each base lost in their state is tens of thousands of jobs lost in their state.
Yeah.
Now that said, once BRAC actually starts closing those things, if you happen to have a coalition of libertarians who want to create an intentional community, that's what you want to catch, because you can literally go in and take over a barrack space, for families and set it up. It's already got a community kitchen at one end. Everybody's got their own rooms. Yeah, you can go in. Garden space in the quad.
First base, the first house I ever owned was a BRAC home. It was when they downsized to Natick Labs in Natick, Massachusetts, from a full-score base to just a research facility. All of the base housing was sold off as private property in the neighborhood surrounding the base. I fucking got a place on auction, dirt cheap. I'm like, yeah, I went to go look at it, and it didn't have a fucking kitchen. I'm like, what the fuck? It was literally, it was like they advertised it as a 4-bedroom house. I'm like, sweet. No, it was 4 rooms, not 4 bedrooms. Ended up being a 2-bedroom with a kitchen and a living room.
But you had to go in and make the modifications later.
Yeah, which I was happy to do.
It already comes with its own infrastructure. It's already got the sewer network in place. It's already got the gas lines, the energy, and they just want to sell it. You can buy a town for cheap. It's already pre-built.
Well, we're over 2 hours now, so I guess we'll cut the stream off here. But
why, man? Why? We're on a roll.
I know I'm on Eastern time now, so I'm.
That's right. It's 10 o'clock. Everybody's getting tired of us, getting ready to go to sleep.
But yeah. Thanks for coming on, guys. I got your Twitter links in the descriptions. People can follow you there, and then I've got your new YouTube channel on there, Justin. But Joe, you're running for office right now, correct?
Yes, I am.
I'm sorry.
Idaho, 1st Congressional District.
How can people help you out with that?
Good question. Right now, I'm still busy waiting for all the dust to settle from the Republican primary here. We literally got 7 Republican candidates for the governorship, and every one of them is trying to outright the other. I'm more Christian than the other guy. I'm more anti-abortion than the other guy. I'm more, and it's like, Jesus Christ, man. How outright right can you get? 7 of them, man, and we're literally getting bombarded with this garbage, daily. But yeah. Look for my website. Look, you haven't got the donation site set up yet, but the website, follow me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, pay attention to what's going on. And, I'm busy involved with a number of things right now. Legalization of marijuana, medical marijuana here in the state of Idaho. It's one of my big drives. And again, one of the reasons PTSI, let's get that right. It's post-traumatic stress injury. Reason why is because it's an injury. It's not a disorder, motherfuckers. It's an injury, and it can be healed. But PTSI for veterans, I support legalization of marijuana. Idaho is one of the few states that's still a holdout on that, and I've been busy involved in that campaign lately. So, but pay attention. More information to follow, folks.
Yeah, I've got definitely up in Bonners Ferry, Idaho. I was meeting them this January. They're getting sick of they don't even smoke weed, but they were talking about how behind the ball the state is on that.
Dude, $3 million a week. $3 million a week. That's how much money leaves the state. Idahoans drive outside of the state, spend $3 million a week, buy their weed, buy their marijuana, buy their edibles, and turn around and drive right back across the border with it. $3 million a week.
Yeah.
You guys definitely want to make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's not just liberty focused. It's all the fuck over the place on how people outside of the libertarian movement can advance liberty. I just had an interview with Mark Nelson, he's a nuclear engineer who's currently lobbying to help end solar and wind subsidies and help save nuclear power. And Monday night,
end all the subsidies.
Monday night, I have a Democrat from Oregon coming on, and she's going to try and make a libertarian case for UBI. That'll be a real fun argument. And last week, I had Gary Vaynerchuk on to talk about NFTs and cryptocurrency. All the fuck over the place. Wicked fun.
And he's had me on.
I've had Reed on too. Reed's been on a couple times. Reed's shows are the most fun. You got to go look at those.
It's extreme though, very extreme.
You'll get a content warning.
He did give the content warning before this one. He did say we were talking adult content and going to be using the F word a lot.
I don't even have to say that anymore. I mean, people just know that when they're coming over here.
People just know the conversation's going to be screwed up. Going to have people going, "Yeah, Joe, that's a visual I really did not need."
That's what you get.
Sorry about that, man.
You need all the visuals. Just do some massive.
Yeah. Well, yeah, everyone go follow these guys on Twitter. Keep up with them. Maybe Justin will get bored enough in civilian life and decide to run for something again eventually, but he's going to have some Twitter posts he's going to have to answer for now, so maybe not.
I won't apologize for them on the Senate floor.
No, please don't. Don't apologize for Twitter posts. That's crazy.
Not like Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Ours are worse than hers too, by the way. So,
ironically, yes.
I mean, they are correct, but they're not like batshit like hers, but they're worse.
She had to apologize for tweeting about the Jewish space lasers.
We won't have to apologize for something like that. Don't worry. But yeah, I'll be streaming on Tuesday with Drew Hancock, Thursday with Dave Smith, 9/11 with Pete Quinones, and then 9/12 with Austin Peterson. So next week, got a big week.
And everybody go bother Malang Coste on Twitter and tell him to come on our shows.
Absolutely. Malang. He's probably the most based follow you'll get. He's got a better sense of humor than the entire American left. So